particularly as it relates to the budget. I think it's been an interesting process to learn being in the super minority position. And it's like a master class in collaboration. When you don't have that many members and you want to advocate for your people too. But I find that when we find issues that are just as true as they are in my district, I'm in Louisville, so I'm an urban legislator. When I attach to an issue that's in rural, western, or eastern Kentucky, that's where I see we have the most traction.
Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast focused on incredibly talented people who've dedicated themselves to public service when their country and communities needed it the most. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bultan of the NewDEAL, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. The NewDEAL is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. Check out newdealleaders.org to find out more.
In today's episode, I speak with Kentucky State Representative Joshua Watkins. Elected as House Minority Whip in November, ahead of his second term, Representative Watkins talks about his path into elected office and how being in the supermajority is a masterclass in collaboration. We also discuss Governor Beshear's national appeal, how best to help renters with the high cost of housing, his advice for pursuing performance measurements, and how his outside creative interests, from songwriting to local theater, translate to his work in the legislature. Representative Watkins brings an optimism and a joy to his work that's contagious. I hope you enjoy. All right, Representative Joshua Watkins, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Hello there. I'm so excited to be with you. Thank you.
I'm so excited to be with you. There's so much to talk about going on in the world right now. But maybe I will start with your role as a relatively new legislator in Kentucky. You've been doing government work and local government for a long time, which I want to talk about. But just to, as a representative who's out there representing their constituents every day, maybe just start with what you're hearing on the ground. What are you, when you're out talking to people that you represent, what are you hearing most that's on top of people's minds these days?
I think what I'm noticing more, well, first of all, thank you again for allowing me to be here. I'm super excited about it. And you said something earlier that I want to make sure I can clarify. So this is my second year and second term, but does that mean I can't call myself a new legislator anymore? Because I feel like you get so much grace when you get to say I'm a freshman or I'm a new legislator. But what I'm hearing from everyday people, we're coming off of our budget session. Mm-hmm. So we actually finished on April 15th. And I'm hearing directly from voters and constituents about how far or how not far, for lack of better words, they feel our budget is going to reach. And so that everyday people in issues like healthcare. So we go to Medicaid. People are talking about housing all across Kentucky. Or they're talking about food security and the price of gas and whether or not they're going to land a job that's going to pay them a wage where they can make ends meet and plan for the future. And quite frankly, even in Kentucky, I'm hearing conversations where people are concerned about our democracy. They're concerned about our elections with a slate of bills that's come across and wondering how we are going to be resilient throughout all of the federal changes.
Yeah. Well, on the budget side, how are you guys, I should point out, people probably know, but you are in a super minority, right? 80-20 Democrats to Republicans, 20 Democrats. So how are you feeling like, what would you say, how would you characterize the budget process yourself going through it? How do you feel like the direction is headed? Do you feel like Democrats are getting anything that they hope to see in there? Where are we in the process?
So I think we're about to close it out. So we're in our veto period right now. We're sort of seeing what our governor is going to do. Shout out to Governor Andy Beshear. We love him in Kentucky, and I realize that people love him all across Kentucky. So we're following his lead in a lot of ways to see what bills are going to come across his desk or those that he's going to send back to us, particularly as it relates to the budget. I think it's been an interesting process to learn being in the super minority position. And it's like a master class in collaboration. When you don't have that many members and you want to advocate for your people too. But I find that when we find issues that are just as true as they are in my district, I'm in Louisville, so I'm an urban legislator. when I attach to an issue that's in rural, western, or eastern Kentucky, that's where I see we have the most traction. And that is probably best represented in our state employee health plan. We had a massive amount of outreach from state employees who were concerned that we were going to put a cap on employer or state contributions, which would have seen some premiums when you talk about skyrocket, they were going to skyrocket. And people really reached out to us about that. And we worked with our Republican colleagues on that, and we got that cap to be removed in that. That was a positive. If I could just kind of bookend it on something that I feel like people are talking about, we hadn't gone far enough, and that's for our retirees. We were wanting to do, they haven't had a cost of living raise since 2011, and we wanted to do a 13th check, for lack of better words, just something to say, you have built the Commonwealth for the bulk of your earning years, and we want to thank you, because that dollar doesn't go as far as it used to 10 years ago, especially when we're thinking about inflation. And we didn't get that done. And people are definitely letting us know about that.
Yeah. What's the process for engaging people in the budget process, just out of curiosity, like your constituents or those of your colleagues across the country? Or do people feel like they've got a voice, or how are they engaging in that?
That is a really interesting question. And I will say, you're probably going to get a different response whether you're talking to the House or the Senate, because our processes are actually very different from each other. When it comes to the general operating budget, which is the budget that essentially keeps the lights on, that is something that we come to in conference committee with leadership between the House and between the Republicans and the Democrats in the House. We come to a conference committee and we see how close the Republican-led budget is going to be to our governors. And so we tend to have similar priorities. Obviously, our governor is a Democrat. It really shows itself when we talk about roads and one-time expenditures. So those are some of the special projects that every legislator wants to have in their district. In the House, we were supposed to submit, it was essentially a project form. And we had no limit to the amount of project forms that we could put out there. We were asked to prioritize when we're talking to the chair of A&R what those one-time expenditures were. And then we have a completely different road process that we get to hear from our constituents on. What was encouraged for me to do as a new legislator, but particularly on the Democrat side, is we did a lot of road shows, went back to our local districts, talked to local elected officials, mayors, city council folks, et cetera, to see those projects. And then our regional transporting authorities, we got projects from them. And that's those are the input that helped me make my decisions, that and the one-time projects. The Senate was very, very different from that. And I think voters are comparing the two processes and seeing if they were beneficial at all.
That's interesting. I mean, so it is an interesting scenario that we're talking about here with your very popular Democratic governor and the supermajority for the Republicans. How much does the governor, obviously he's got some veto power, but beyond that, on the input side, is he having, how much is he able to shape some of what's coming out of the legislature with that Republican supermajority?
Well, the governor is incredibly popular. And one of the reasons why he is because he's a hands-on governor. He goes everywhere. Someone from his team is everywhere, and they're listening to people. And so I think he sets the vision, the policy vision, I think, for the Kentucky. And it's evidenced by some of the results that we have had. Kentucky, under his leadership, has had record-breaking years in economic development, year over year over year. And that has to do a lot with his leadership in that space, not only in Kentucky, across the country, but even abroad. He represents us very well. He does something really well on education. And I think most people, if you're in Kentucky, you have heard pre-K for all. And it's something that has been shaped through the governor's policy positions, and something that we championed as well, because we know that a strong Commonwealth is an educated Commonwealth. And that starts very early on. And so he works across the aisle in the House and the Senate to see where there are places to negotiate. And I've seen some of that evidence in more so the Senate's version of the budget processes. But even in the House as well, there are some things that we agree upon that he immediately tells us where it is. And where we fall short, he also lets us know that we need to deliver in a different way for the people of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I'll come back to legislature, but I guess since we're on the topic of your governor, obviously, all eyes. You kind of alluded to it on 28. He certainly is a name that gets batted around a lot. I would say that the other thing that I hear a lot about him is, how well he handled some really devastating natural disasters you all face in his tenure, how he handled and communicated with the constituents during COVID. Anything else you want to put a plug in on? What do you think that the people of Kentucky would be speaking of first if they were selling the governor to the rest of the country?
Oh, wow. Well, if you're in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, it is not a rarity to hear somebody call him Uncle Andy. I mean, they really do. It's a term of endearment. In some places, Cousin Andy or whatever that sort of familiar term and that's because the governor does, for a lot of people, feel like he's a part of your family.
Mm-hmm.
He's incredibly personable. He's incredibly relatable. As a local, the new elected official who worked in local government but then came to the state, one of the things that I hear when I knock doors or I call people back is, oh my God, can't believe that my representative is right here. He's a very accessible governor. And when you have someone who's making decisions for you and your family's future, and you feel like you can talk to him or you feel like he understands because he speaks directly to you, he's showing up in those sites where there are disasters. He's praying for you. He literally will do that. And I think what the people should know is that the governor that you hear about and the ones that you see on TV that has some of the quirky jokes and things, that's exactly who he is when you are one-on-one with him. And I've had the pleasure to be one-on-one with him in a lot of ways. And he doesn't allow you to be, I don't know if it's appropriate to say starstruck. You can't be starstruck with Governor Beshear. You just can't, because he will pull you in. He'll get close to you and say, talk to me.
Yeah.
And that is a skill that I think more people, we love it in the Commonwealth, but I believe we're seeing that more and more people across the country want that. They want somebody they can trust and believe in.
Yeah, well, I think people are super intrigued by the fact that he's, as you were saying, so popular in such a ruby red state that's it really interesting to people. Let's stay on the topic of leadership. You are a new-ish legislator. I'll give you that. You get to keep the new title, but you are also, of course, in leadership already. You were elected whip for the Democrats, I believe. So in November, October last year. Congratulations. So tell me about that role and how that came about and how you're finding that role.
Oh, wow. It is the honor of my life to simply be a legislator. I have a lot of roots in Kentucky. Although my parents raised my siblings and I in Florida, my father is from the western part of the state in a town called Hopkinsville, or Hoptown, if you know. If you know.
If you know, you know. Okay, Hoptown.
Hoptown is what it's saying. But I come from a long line of folks who have, just like America, built the Commonwealth truly with their hands. And one person I like to talk about is my almost 99-year-old great uncle Matthew. He is a World War II veteran, one of a shrinking number of World War II veterans altogether, particularly as a Black veteran. And when he came back to the United States from the war, he didn't get a GI Bill because he was Black. His great nephew gets to sit in Frankfurt. And I never forgotten that. Every time I walk through these halls, I walk to the Capitol, I get to say that I'm the son of Harley and Mary Watkins, and I'm the grandson of John Matthew and Lydia Galbraith. And I get to be the promise of America in real time. And so for me, being elected was that. Being elected into leadership is a journey of your peers. And it's what the people that you work with have to say about you. I don't know about you, but I love a team player. And that's sometimes what legislators and constituents don't think about. They elect you to go to the state house or serve federally, but you're not there by yourself. And I wanted my colleagues to know, I came in with a group of freshmen. We call ourselves the Fab Five, but because we needed something to be happy about. We're the I mean, come on. But I wanted to be a team player, and to have my colleagues respect and trust me to do that has been an amazing journey, an incredible learning curve, and it's very, very fast. But I'm super grateful to have their trust as we go along.
I'm going to embarrass you, and I don't normally do this, but when I was prepping for this interview, I read this quote, and I want someone to say this about me in my life. So I'm going to read this quote, which is, this was from the Democratic leader Pamela Stevenson when you got elected whip. She said, Representative Watkins can always be counted on for bringing energy, optimism, joy to serving others that lifts everyone up around him. I was like, I just loved that quote. And I was like, I think we should all strive to have someone say that about us in our lives. So you were talking about that optimism and that joy and that fun. And that reminded me of that quote that I had read.
Oh, that's so, well, thank you for that reminder. And the leader is incredibly gracious for that, because I don't think I would have been in this role. Leader Stevenson is also in Louisville, and she is a legendary name in the city. I mean, she's historic in herself. I mean, she's the first Black woman to lead a party, a caucus. And so to have that be said about anybody is incredible. But that whole joy and optimism, when you're in a super minority position, you have to remember why you're doing it, and to come here every day with your colleagues and knowing that they came for the same reasons. I don't know. I hope my excitement and my gratitude doesn't read inauthentic, but it is such a blessing to be able to wake up every day and have a family on your mind and think, I can do something to help them. I don't know. I love it. I love it in this moment.
I've got the goosebumps. People have said, my colleagues will know that my favorite compliment NewDEAL has ever gotten is that we are a cynicism-free zone, and that is my favorite thing. And I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Absolutely.
I love you so much.
Oh, thank you for that. And I in thinking about some of the work you've been doing, I know that housing has been a big issue for you since you've been in the legislature. And in fact, you're on the housing task force, which is a bipartisan effort. So, I mean, how are you able to come together, particularly across the aisle, to make progress? And maybe you can talk a little bit about your bill, which you will remind me what it's called, but you had a really great housing bill this session. So talk to us about what you're up to.
Yeah, I think maybe House Bill 228 or 229 is actually the byproduct of something that I filed my very first year, which is a part of we called the Omnibus. So this was like Omnibus 2.0. But the first year I got in, we filed the Kentucky Housing Opportunity Act, which was about 14 or 15 legislative actions that really dealt with the ecosystem that is housing, because it's not simply just putting shovels in the ground. You have regulatory issues that you think about. You have zoning that you have to think about. What the marketplace is going to accept. You think about displacement, gentrification, all of those things you have to think about. And so this year, we really wanted to talk about housing finance, because that's one of the biggest issues that is impacting our drastic need for housing supply. We're short 240,000 plus affordable housing units in Kentucky alone. And we see nationally that the average age of a first-time home buyer is 40 years old. And that just boggles the mind for us. So what we tried to do is to create a $100 million affordable housing loan fund, and something that is a revolving mechanism. So to our counterparts on the other side who care more about sort of fiscal conservatism, we really tried to sell that return on investment and how every dollar invested in affordable housing is going to pay off in some cases tenfold, if not more. The governor supplemented that with a $125 million ask to put to our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which would have, leveraged up to $1 billion plus more dollars in real estate development. You talked about walking across the aisle and working together with our colleagues. But we need housing in Louisville just like they needed in Pikeville, just like they needed in Hopkinsville and everywhere else. I mean, we have students who are graduating from our wonderful universities, and they're leaving Kentucky because they don't have a place to live. We have seniors who are wanting to downsize, or maybe even want to stay in the homes that they are in, but they can't afford the property taxes. And don't get me wrong, and I don't want to leave out something that kind of gets left out in this conversation, and that's those who rent. Rent in places across the Commonwealth in the past 2 or 3 years has gone up 50, 60, 70% for some folks. And that is unsustainable as we look at inflation and slow wage growth. So my counterparts see that in their home districts as well. And so it's just saying that we have the same problems. Now it's trying to figure out how we get to the same solutions. And we started a little bit. I don't think we've gone as far as I wanted to, but I'm excited that we do have some common ground on addressing housing in the future.
Yeah. What are some of those ways, or any way you're thinking about on the renter front? I mean, on the trust fund and the loans, those are such great things. Some of that's about building more supply. Some of that's about giving those, presumably, right, the down payments for people, then they'll pay back or something, and that revolving loan, which I think is great. I think you're right, though. Renting gets left out of this conversation too frequently. What are you seeing that's working to help with the renters?
So the leader did a bill this year that I was super excited about, and it was a renter tax credit. And I don't know about you all, but I had never heard of a rental tax credit at a state level before at all. And essentially, it would, for sort of positive payment history over time, I mean, it would give a renter up to, I think it was $1,000 or more to come back to that renter as a tax credit. And that goes a long way with a lot of people when you need that. Secondly, on the regulatory elements, there was another colleague of mine who also believed was a new dealer in Rep. Nima Kulkarni, who did some work. And she has been working for years to update the Landlord Tenant Act code, so we call the URALTA, to make sure that we have standardizations across the board when it comes to the health and cleanliness and availability of rental units across the Commonwealth. She also did something that I really liked around accessory dwelling units and making those a right in a lot of places. And that's where she was working on that as well. I thought that was fantastic. Last thing I want to say, because I feel like my answers are sort of too broad and long, but I want to highlight the Yes in God's Backyard legislation, what we know as YIGBY, really kind of the West Coast. YIGBY actually got across the finish line in the House and the Senate this year. And so that allows, for those who don't know, religious institutions to develop a certain amount of affordable housing on their property. And that is going to be a massive game changer, I believe, in the state. I think we go up to, don't quote me on this, it's probably somewhere between 12 and 20 units. My district, there's a church on every corner almost.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I am seeing that in certain places. I know North Carolina and Raleigh, they're doing something on that, where we're going to this year for Ideas Summit later this spring. That's really exciting. That's a really exciting development that you guys did. I didn't realize that. I love that. You have a lot of interesting, you have a background, and I want to get to some of the fun stuff you do, but in terms of your profession first, you mentioned it earlier that you started out in local government. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is how you got there, what kind of drew you into local government in the first place, and then some of the work that you were doing, which was really focused on a lot of words we like to say, like things about performance and outcomes, and trying to just make sure that we're delivering, being good stewards of money and delivering results. And so I'd love to just kind of hear how you found your way to local government to begin with. Is that something you always wanted to do in your life, or was that a surprise to you?
My parents are going to give a different answer to this question than I would, because my dad had to remind me that in the first grade, I wrote a paper that said I wanted to be a United States Senator.
I love that so much.
Why I was doing that in the first grade, I have no idea why that was top of mind for me, and not going to the playground or having the latest version of snacks. But my dad said that, and I believe that sort of call for service really comes from our family's background in ministry when it comes to being the son of a pastor and whatnot. So service was always in my DNA, caring for people. My father worked in the Florida State Department of Corrections, and also as a preacher, he embodied restorative justice. So folks would get released, and so people would come to our house. They would come to our church. My dad would single-handedly help people rebuild their lives, my dad and mom. And they raised 5 children together collectively, and in a working class family. And so service and caring for everyday people was what I grew up with altogether. Coming out of college, now I graduated during the financial meltdown. And so if you were in college during between 2008, maybe to 2011 or 12, it was a completely different world out there for millennials. And so I knew I wanted to go into public service because it felt safe. I mean, the marketplace was just really all over the place. I thought I was going to go to law school. So I got a job in real estate because I did that as an RA on campus. And I said, oh, well, I'll do this real estate thing because I always have a roof over my head. And when you put yourself through school, you have to make that decision, right? You don't have the safety net to fall back on. And I got the real estate bug and I started working for a developer. And that's when I understood city issues and zoning. I started understanding where people wanted to live. But in the back of my mind, I still wanted to serve in public office. And I thought, what better way to do that than to understand how people live their lives? And that's in the neighborhood and that's in their housing. I got as far as I could in the company I worked for, which was a regional developer. And I saw a job in the city government at the time, which was doing land banking. And I said, that's it. It was real estate. It was my in into government. And I got in there bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as a millennial. You know, I was going to change the world. I knew I was going to do it. And I kept getting met with my passion was welcomed as long as it worked with the status quo. But the moment I wanted to, do something new, it was, whoa, you're moving too fast, or you got to buy your time and pay your dues. And that's when I started saying, government is supposed to be responsive to the people. And we're moving at the speed of an idea now. We have to move faster. And that's when I got into performance improvement. So all of the nerdy stuff, PMP, Agile, Six Sigma, Lean, TQM, I dove into it because I'm a nerd and I love to read and learn. And I started fixing things projects by projects at a time. And I started seeing the people respond to government meeting their needs. And I did that for almost 11 years of doing land banking, violence prevention. I created the homeless services division in our city government, did a lot of projects throughout COVID time with ARPA funds and whatnot. And I got tapped to run for office by an outgoing representative who is now Senator Couture Herring. And she told me one last thing. She said, I spent almost 11 years of my life learning how to make people's lives better. And if you're a Democrat in Louisville, you don't want to go to Frankfurt because it's full of, you're a super minority. But she told me the community needed me to serve publicly. And why would I take all of that experience and keep it to myself?
Oh, I love that line, actually. Good for her. What a great recruitment tool that was. Oh my gosh. She played on your guilt, your service guilt. I absolutely love it. Well, and one more question, I think, I'm also a geek and, and I saw the Sigma 6 and all the stuff you've been working on. It's so cool. And you said, I think I heard you say that, people responded to that kind of more responsive, effective governance, which is so great. I think that's something we tout a lot. Sometimes it's hard to make those changes internally. I know that part of what you did at some point was to think about performance evaluations for people inside government. And that can be scary for people. Do you have any tips for people who are trying to do that kind of organizational change that you found to be effective where you had success?
I do. So we did one of the first maturity models of our enterprise when I was chief of performance under the former mayor, Mayor Greg Fisher, and he was there, who was a stalwart in performance improvement. I mean, everybody had to know that if you wanted to serve at any level in his cabinet. When I became an actual leader that had direct reports, I started with myself. And to be completely honest, I was terrified. I had heard of 360 performance reviews before, and I wanted to see them across the enterprise, but I started with my own team, and I did one on myself, and it was terrifying because you think one way as a leader, you think you're meeting people's needs and creating an environment, but you never know unless you give people the freedom and the safety to tell you whether or not you're hitting the mark. And so I did just a small rating from 1 to 5 and without going too in depth. And my first score, I think I got a 4.0 out of 5. And I was excited about that, but I have a weakness orientation. So it was all anonymous. And I spent a long time trying to figure out, well, did I make somebody mad? Like, what did I do wrong? I wanted a 4.5 or a 5. And so I quietly asked people, tell me what your goals are. I let my team members start running their one-on-ones with me. And they begin to slowly tell me how to support them. And I just did what they asked. And before I left, I got a 5. And I was so, so proud of that. So in order to change an environment, especially if you're a leader, you have to be vulnerable and allow yourself to be changed first. No one's going to follow you if you are always seen as the person that says, "Oh, it's good for thee, but not for me."
I love that. I love that. We could dive. I could go so down that road right now, particularly with the leadership we have in the White House. But we're wrapping up, so I will not go. But I do love that. I love that advice so much. Can we just talk for a minute about some of the really cool things you do besides being a minister? You are a musician. I think you're a singer songwriter, and you're a theater kid,
Yeah.
adult, kid and adult. I have two kids. One is a musician, one's a theater person. So I felt a lot of kinship with you. So
Mhm.
tell me, how you balance all that, and are you still performing in doing that stuff?
Yes, you balance it out by being really good at schedule blocking. Because
Fair enough.
there's just not enough hours in the day. You always want to go somewhere and do a show. I do community theater a lot, and there was a performing troupe called Faith Work Studios that I worked with, and I got to be in shows like The Wiz and Motown Christmas, and those things were really exciting. And then, of course, on the more religious side, I got to do Easter programs and such. I actually believe in committing to the character, and I got to be on a cross, like hung up like 20 feet in the air, and being like one of the thieves that were on the cross in the biblical
Wow.
resonates with people.
Yeah.
I
Very
go to
appropriate since we're speaking Easter week to
church,
raise that point.
so I go to church on Sundays and I perform in the worship band, but I'm also a singer songwriter who writes for other local artists. And
Oh,
so I have to have
amazing.
that creative time. Now, I believe in being creative inside of government. That's where I do my best sort of work, but I'd like to write songs and such for local artists, and I like to sing background and such for them. I don't ever perceive myself as being like a traveling singer who is well known and such, but what I do hope to do is to create music that touches people and connects to them in a way where they feel seen and their lives are experienced just the way I hope to do in government. I want to use my God given talents to do good in the world so that people in their home neighborhoods, people all across the Commonwealth, are choosing Kentucky because they can see a future there. And they
Hmm.
see a future that they can connect to, just like you would like a quilt. You can be interconnected, and I want people to feel that way in Kentucky. And I really hope we get back to that in America and having people who come here from all walks of life because they have something to add to this great tapestry that is America, and that we value all of these parts as a larger quilt for that more perfect union that we always talk about.
Yeah, well, that was beautiful. That feels like a mic drop moment right there. Th- mic drop. Thank you for all you're doing, for your service, and for being part of New Deal. And it's just been such a pleasure to talk to you and get to know you a little bit more and talk about some of the great advice you've got for people around the country. Of
Can I say one thing about New
course,
Deal
you
to
may.
you? Because I know we
Yes.
talked very briefly in DC, but when I got here and even coming out of local government, I was struggling. One of the reasons why I was scared to, I don't think I've ever told anybody this publicly. So I was terrified of having a statewide office because I didn't see how I fit in the
Hmm.
entire equation. I'm a pragmatic person. I have progressive thoughts. I have all these things. I agree with certain concepts that you will see that are more populist, but I also believe that no party or ideology has a monopoly on a good idea.
I totally agree with you.
And I didn't see that, especially in Kentucky. And so I was terrified of putting myself out there and having people say, "You don't represent me, you don't care." In local government, there's no Democratic street or Republican trash can. You got to do it for everybody. And I didn't think that resonated. When I heard about you all, and I actually I read it all and applied and got accepted and went to my first meeting, I was like, thanks be to God, I found people that I felt seen and understood by, and I could be myself and not try to tailor it for a moment. When you're talking to people, you want to meet people where they are. You all were where I was
Hmm.
immediately, and I did not have a home at first. And to be completely honest, that was going to cut my public service career pretty short. I mean, I thought I was going to be here for a few years, but without having that community, I didn't know how long I was going to last. So
Hmm.
I'm grateful for you all existing because I really,
Oh,
I really,
well, Thank you so much for that. I'm so grateful for that. That's why we do the work we do, is to hope that we can provide a home for people like you who are doing such great work. And it's just so validating to have you say that to us. So thank you so much for that lovely compliment. And I hope to see you very soon. And thank you for everything you're doing. I'll see you in North Carolina very soon.
I'm excited. Thank you so much.
Thanks for taking the time today.
My pleasure.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. And because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars were used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.